Hello, Conroe Church. So I was talking to a friend of mine this last week. We're just talking about this whole thing, this whole coronavirus thing, isolation, shutdown, reopen. We're just talking about the whole thing, just talking about the impact that it's had on our world and in our lives. And he said something to me that I found very interesting because I've heard it over and over and over, and it's starting to become a real constant thing in conversations. He says, one thing that really surprises me about all this is that all of a sudden I just have this anger and it'll just explode. And I don't know where it comes from. And I haven't been angry and I don't even know what triggers it. But I've got this anger. It just comes out at times that I least expect it. He's talking about how he's trying to deal with this anger that he doesn't even know the source of. And I am hearing that more and more often. I'm hearing it from people that I know and love, of this anger that just seems to be just below the surface, they're not even aware of, ready to just explode at a moment's notice. But I don't think it's just confined to a few people. I think we're seeing that throughout our culture. I mean, think about it. The things that we're reading. I'm shocked at some of the pot shots that people are taking and who they're taking them at. For example, you just see people taking pot shots at first responders, at doctors and nurses, at EMTs, at police officers, people who are putting their lives on the line to try to help people all the time. And all of a sudden you're seeing these pot shots taken at these folks. It's really confusing to me. I can't understand how you could take a shot at someone who's trying to help you, but it's happening, and it's done out of anger. And then you can see the at-risk population. People are just taking pot shots at the at-risk population. It's been amazing to see some of the things that people will say and some of the memes that are being made and circulated out there. I think the one that epitomizes it the most to me is you probably saw 2-3 weeks ago, there was a protest in Tennessee. I believe it was in Tennessee. And there's a guy standing there. I think it's a guy. He's got big old sunglasses on, and his whole face is wrapped up, so it's hard to see if it's a guy or a girl, but I think it's a guy. And his sign says, "Sacrifice the weak." At the bottom, reopen. Sacrifice the weak, reopen. Well, you can be for reopening, but does that mean you have to lose whatever heart you may have had and say sacrifice the weak? And to the person wearing, who was brave enough to cover their face up so no one can see? I mean, so what if that weak person is the person that you love the most in this world? How can you say that? How can you have such a little heart that you can make a sign that says sacrifice the weak, but there's all this anger out there? And then there's all this racial tension that keeps coming up. It keeps bubbling to the surface and exploding. I mean, there's anger all over the place. And when you think about it, that probably makes sense. Psychiatrists and psychologists are telling us that anger is actually a part of a bigger issue, and that is grief. They say it shouldn't surprise us when we see all this anger out there because it's a part of the grieving process. There are several steps in grief. Anger is one of them. And they're saying that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing the grieving process. You go, okay, well, but what are we grieving? Well, we're grieving loss. Think about it. I mean, we're grieving loss. What have we lost? Well, we've lost one-on-one relationships, face-to-face relationships, the ability to make an appointment with somebody and go down and sit across the lunch table from them. But we've lost jobs. I mean, we've lost our future, the way that we thought our future was going to look. We've lost that. We've lost our normal. I mean, so everything is fluid right now. Everything's a moving target, and so we have lost. We've lost more than we can probably even articulate, more than we can probably even consciously think we've lost. And so psychologists say there's a grieving process going on, not just in this country, but over the entire population of the world at loss. So what is the response to grief that God would have for us? Well, fortunately, God does have a response to us in our grief. And that response is comfort. That's what you do with someone who's in grief. Someone who's grieving, you comfort them. And God has that response to pour into our struggle with grief. He pours comfort. Over in the second letter that he wrote to the Corinthian church, right there at the very beginning of that letter, he says, "Blessed be the Lord and God of Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. He is the Father of compassion. He is the God of all comfort. And being the God of all comfort, he brings comfort to us in our tribulation. In other words, in our grief. It says he brings comfort to us in our grief. And God doesn't just leave us there. He doesn't have us struggle with grief and then give us some comfort and then just go away and say, okay, we're done. He actually asks us to pay it forward in the next verse. He says he'll comfort us in our tribulation so that we can go comfort somebody else in their tribulation with that same comfort that God gave us. Same thing. So he's asking us, if I'm going to comfort you, which I will, then go pay it forward to somebody else who really needs the same thing. Okay, good. So how does God comfort us? I think the best way that I can think of, the best analogy would be, think of a little kid at home at night in their bed. Surely this happened to you at one time or another. And I know kids take advantage of this, and I know they try to manipulate parents, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a real, legitimate time at night when they're scared, they're not trying to manipulate you, they're truly frightened, they're afraid of the dark, they're afraid of something in the closet, they're afraid of something under the bed, they're afraid, and they show up at their parents' door and say, Mom or Dad, I'm scared. You know, when it's a real thing, when the kid is not trying to be manipulative, but when they're truly afraid, only the most heartless of moms and dads are going to go, get out of here, I don't want to hear from you again until in the morning. That's not what they do. A parent is going to feel compassion toward a child who is afraid. And so they're going to take them, they're going to wrap them in their arms, and maybe they'll go into their bedroom, back in their bedroom with them, and lay down with them, or maybe they'll sit on the bed, or maybe they'll read them a story, or maybe they'll get a flashlight and look under the bed and in the closet and show them, it's all okay, there's nothing here, there's no monster, there's no nothing, you're all good, we're right in the next bedroom. Whatever they do, they're going to try to do their very best to bring comfort to their child. And that's what God does to us. Over in Isaiah chapter 43, he tells us, when you walk through the fire, I'll be with you. He doesn't say if you walk through the fire. He says when you walk through the fire, I'll be with you. And then he says this, and the flames won't overcome you. They won't overtake you. Which means there will be flames. But here's why. He says, because I'm the Lord your God. I'm the Holy One of Israel. I'm your Savior. So do not fear. Do not be afraid. See, there's the guy who can say don't be afraid with authority because he can make all those fears go away. That's the comfort that God gives us. He gives us his presence, just like a parent gives their child when they're afraid at night. So how about the pay it forward part? He says, so when I've comforted you from your tribulation, from your grief, you take that and go comfort somebody else with the same comfort I've given you. So he actually gives us our marching orders as well. You go find somebody who's really struggling in the middle of this. I mean, you can throw a rock and probably hit 10 people right now who are struggling in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic, who are afraid, who are grieving, who are angry. They've lost things, and they don't know what the future holds. And you know what we do when that happens? We start worrying. We start creating alternate futures, and we start worrying about things that may never happen. And God just goes, listen, if you will just rest in my presence, it'll comfort you. It'll be enough. As a matter of fact, it's better than anything else you can do. Rest in my presence. And so, Conroe Church, as we comfort one another, I think our calling this week is pretty easy. But it takes some real intentionality. Our calling would be this first. If you're really struggling with the grieving process, rest in God's presence. Get some rest, literally. Then get some rest awake, but sit in God's presence. Let him calm your spirit. He's the only one that can do that. There aren't any gimmicks out there that are going to calm your spirit. That's God's job. That's his territory. Let God calm your soul. Trust in his promise in Isaiah 43. Read that. Read those first 4 verses over and over and over. And let God calm your spirit. And then go pay it forward. You know one person in particular. If you ask God to put one person in your brain who really is struggling with grief right now, he'll do that. So take that one name and go sit with them on a Zoom call or go sit in a driveway at good social distancing in chairs, call them on the phone, however you need to do it. But find them and just share with them the peace that God's given you. That's how we can pay it forward. And that is how we can comfort one another, just as God comforts us. So, Conroe Church, hope you have a great rest of the week. Go in peace.